Hello, this is Jeff Bird with Jeffrey Bird Coaching, and we welcome you to this Wisdom Minute. And today I have the privilege of being with Willie Butler. Willie is the president and the founder of the Life Planning Institute here in Norfolk, Virginia. So, Willie, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
So, as you may know, two topics that are very dear to my heart are leadership and growth. And the reason I asked Willie to join us this morning is because he has a lot of experience in both of those areas. So the first thing I'm going to ask him about is going to go back a few years to an experience he had when he worked for TWA, Trans World Airlines. And he was in a management position eventually, but I want to ask you, when you came to that management position, what was the situation that you found with the team, their motivation, performance, attitudes?
Well, the airlines generally are at least back then, this is the late 70s, early 80s time frame. Unions were very strong, and there was a huge chasm between both management and unions. So a lot of labor was in the union, and they didn't necessarily get along with a lot of the managerial policies, and they didn't do work necessarily the way management wanted it done. So the environment was somewhat hostile in that sense. Very, very strong unions represented by strong shop stewards, and they resisted a lot of the things that management was attempting to do.
Okay. And I know with that, the attitude and then the performance, those two almost always go hand in hand.
Yes.
So now you've explained to me in the past, and I'd like you to share today, because I imagine there are a number of people in management positions who can relate to that type of performance and mentality from their teams. What were some of the things that you put into effect to try to remedy that situation?
Well, the thing I found most useful was simply giving the employees an opportunity to know the environment they were working in. In other words, know your company, understand the culture, not just from the specific task that you perform, but try to get a better understanding of why is this company in the business that they do, and what is the, more than just its mission statement, what is its attitude toward employees, attitude toward really providing quality service to its customer. And I felt that if I could at least begin a course that an employee, a new hire, would go through, instead of just being thrown out into the field and basically experiencing things from others that may not have been very friendly toward management already, that they would be better served if they became better acquainted with the company and then found their own sense of worth in the work that they perform. So I introduced basically an orientation course that allowed the employee to come in, get a sense of the company's history, get more familiar with the various personnel, that is the management staff that they would be working and reporting to, and then also the functionality of, that is the actual work they would be performing in their own positions. And I tried to get them to understand the significance of what they bring, whether they worked in fleet service, ram service, which were baggage handlers. They were performing a very important job. At least the customer felt that way, if no one else did. And they needed to be able to relate to that, understand that this customer has an expectation that when they arrive at the airport, they're going to be treated a certain way, that their flight will leave on time, it will be clean, they'll get good quality service. And likewise, when they arrive at their destination, that their baggage will be there undamaged and on time. And these are things that if you happen to be in an area where that's the type of work you do, you can take some pride in knowing that you're performing a task that really is meaningful to the bottom line of that business.
That's great. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about you, Willie, is how much value you see in every person, regardless of the role. So with your team, you showed them in these things. You gave them a personal sense of value.
Yes.
You noticed them and acknowledged them as individuals.
Correct.
Not only for the role that they played, the job that they were doing, but also just for who they were. Then you valued the specific job that they were doing, helped them see its significance and importance, and its connection to the bigger team, their other coworkers and the management, and then even broader to all of the people that they were interacting with. So it sounds like you built them up quite a bit in their own sense of worth, significance, and value of the job they were doing.
That's correct.
And
Yes.
then what difference did you see as you went along in this process with your team?
Well, as a supervisor, one of the immediate reactions was employees were reporting to work on a timely basis. They were reporting to their workstations when they were supposed to be there, instead of waiting for a supervisor to basically hover over them so that they know that someone is visibly watching. They would perform their work. And it would go on throughout the course of the day without having that direct overhead, if you will, that direct hovering of supervision. So that meant that they were taking seriously the idea that I'm doing something of importance and I don't need someone watching me in order for me to perform my job. That was the first thing I saw. The second was more in the form of real courtesy. When you work at a large airport, you have an international section, and in that area you have people coming into the country that have never been there before, of course. Sometimes airline employees interact with the passengers that are not just in passenger services, but sometimes the guys from the ramp and the maintenance people and others. And they would make sure that they had their uniforms neat and that they were speaking very courteously, very politely. They didn't conduct themselves as if they didn't really care about the environment around them, but they realized that, in effect, they were representing this company and that they needed to have a certain polished look and way of behaving. And I saw an immediate change in that as well.
Excuse me. That's excellent. Thank you. And so you've seen this over many, many years, and one of the things I most commonly see in training teams is that the people who feel valued are the ones who value others the most.
Absolutely.
When we start with imparting that personal sense that I see you and I value you. You're not just performing a role. I see you as a person. I value what you do. And once that starts to click, then it starts to spread.
It certainly does. Yeah, it's the more positive kind of infection that you want to take place in the workplace in particular.
Yeah, I think we'd all like our teams to be infected with that disease,
Indeed.
Right? Yeah, so that's great. So then I want to transfer over a little bit to the growth, because that was a number of years ago, and now you founded the Life Planning Institute. And one of the things I've noticed just in reading Facebook posts and watching the news in my own life sometimes is that so many of us seem to be more affected than we are effective. And I've noticed even in prayers, I'll listen to them a lot of times, and we're praying that God will just arrange everything around us and everybody around us so that we're affected in the way we want to be affected. Now, nothing wrong with that or the desire to have things go well, but so often I think we miss the piece of using our strengths, our gifts, our resources, and developing them to their fullest potential so that we are having a positive effect. We're not just being affected, we're pushing back, we're in a positive way to make a difference. Like Steve Jobs once said, one of the brilliant realizations in life is that things are the way they are because of the way people think and act, and we can push life and get an outcome on the other side. So what I want to ask you about, because I know you work on this a lot, is how do you help transition? What are the steps from getting a person to their maximum level of effectiveness? I know that's your heart's passion, and if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to share that aspect of my professional growth and my career path.
Absolutely.
For the last 20 plus years now, I've been engaged in the Life Planning Institute initiatives, and at the core are two key things. The first of which is a faith-based acceptance that God is who He says He is. And in that identity that He is God of all. That is, as it says in the book of Psalms, chapter 24, verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwell therein. And for me, I translated that many years ago to imply that God is saying, look, I didn't just put you in the earth, but I made you. I created you. You are mine. And therefore, we should have relationship with each other throughout your life. And I came to realize that that relationship required something of me, and that is to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And in doing so, the Lord would then impart to me an understanding of who I was in him. So a key factor in the life planning initiatives is first and foremost acknowledging who God is, and then allowing him through that process to allow you to know who you are in him. And a central role that we perform in him is as a steward in the earth. We own nothing, that verse says, okay? The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, they and all that dwell therein. We are earthly stewards of everything God has entrusted to us in the earth. That includes our gifts, our talent, and our ability. And when one comes to accept that I don't own anything, but rather has been entrusted with managing for someone else, well, I can't manage your assets unless you and I have a conversation about what your expectations are. I need to know that you expect a certain rate of return if I'm going to manage your assets for you. And if I don't know that, I'm just kind of shooting in the dark. I'm taking risk and maybe even putting at risk the assets that you've entrusted to me. But if we are engaged with the Lord as stewards, then we're basically taking our charge from him. We're learning to manage our time, our talent, and our treasure in ways that allows the Lord to not only direct us, but ultimately enable us to get the optimal benefit from each. So with my treasure, if I share what I have financially, other people are blessed in the process. God gets the glory. If I have time available to me that I can use to volunteer to help other people, they're getting the benefit of my time, and thus I'm blessing them that way. And as far as my talent, if I took whatever gift it is that God has given to me, and again, seek him to know what the gift is and how I can use that gift best, then I can maximize my use of it. And if I'm using it properly, it will be something that is benefiting someone in the process. Every one of us have these. You know, God has endowed every human being with these three, I call them resources. And so in a manner of speaking, what we really are, Jeff, is a comprehensive resource manager of the things God has given to us. And in that capacity, as I go forth trying to figure out how can I be the most effective person, no longer just affective, but no longer thinking about myself and the things that are important for my achievement, but rather seeing myself as a utility, a tool, if you will, that God can now place in an environment and in a setting where he can use it to his glory, then my knowledge of my gifts, my talent and ability give me the means to be able to lend it to that place where I've been set. And God gets to direct me, and ultimately it becomes a much more effective use of my person, because it's not about me. It's about me being able to serve God's kingdom, and in the process of serving God's kingdom, serve my fellow man.
Now, you're making me see a comparison between what you described as the leader at TWA and what you're doing now. When those folks saw a sense of value from you as the manager, that you truly cared for them and valued them and what they were doing, they had a greater effect on the people around them. Now I'm seeing a shift over to God as leader and lover,
Yes.
the one who sacrificed, whose ultimate purpose is to build us up, and he gives up everything in the process. And once somebody catches a little glimpse of that value, then they start seeing the people around them as valuable, start honing those resources, those gifts, those abilities to get involved in this great plan of building up everybody, which is God's heart in the first place. Am I tracking with you?
Oh, you're absolutely.
Okay.
And that's exactly the way that I believe God intended, that his body, what we call the body of Christ, what others affectionately call the church, really builds upon. We are all made in his image and likeness, but yet in the world's setting, we all function very differently, sometimes so differently that we don't always see the similarities or remember that at our very root, we're still of one blood. And as such, we have an obligation, I believe, to be concerned about one another's well-being. If I want the best for Jeff, then I want Jeff to be able to discover who he is, what he was placed here to do, and make sure he's able to get into that setting where he can use his gifts optimally. I consider that a personal obligation. So whenever I hold a course or people come into the Life Planning Institute's program called Kingdom Life Approach, it's my desire that I help them feel like they've discovered something new about their identity. That is to say, they have a greater sense of purpose. And through that greater sense of purpose, they now are trying to associate it with the environment that they're part of and maybe look more closely at what else can I do where I am. If I'm married and have children, I'm already in a setting, so how can I be a better parent? How can I be a better mother or father or husband or wife? If I'm in a workplace and I happen to be an employee that isn't well known necessarily for coming up with great ideas, but maybe my supervisor knows they can always expect me to show up. Maybe they know they can always expect that whenever they have a specific task to be done, they can make that request of me, and I'm there to serve in that capacity. In other words, every one of us, if we examine what is central to our unique design, what have we been empowered to contribute to the whole, wherever it is that we've been placed, there's probably more we can do, if we simply examine ourselves and allow others to even help us see things within us that we may not see about ourselves.
And now I love that, and I love it so much I'm going to divert a little bit from where I told you we were going to go and close out with this. In my mind, that really erases the line between secular and sacred type work. It's not that these sacred things are just work in a church building or some ministry. It makes every person who has received a touch of God's heart for other people and lets that infuse their gifts and abilities in whatever work they are most suited to, be that doctor, plumber, lawyer, financial planner, coach, any job in which they're receiving that more and developing those gifts, that becomes sacred because they're touching other people with the very heart that God has for those people and the way he values and cares for them anyways.
If we, I could not agree any more than what you just said. Probably the most important thing the Lord wants us to grasp is not only to understand how very precious we are in his sight. He loves us, and he has given us the ability to express that same love to others, so that this way God's love ultimately is what is distributed across the world, because we are that extension of him. And to the extent that we allow not just our knowledge of ourselves to be applied, but then we take that kingdom heart that he's given to us, that God-like nature, and allow it to become something that we manifest, whether we do it consciously or not. Every place where we tread, the Spirit of the Lord is. Everywhere we go, God is present with us. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. So wherever I am, the Spirit of the Lord is with me. And as long as I'm in that area, and I allow those attributes of God to be seen and manifest, then my ability to serve is amplified. I'm not even consciously doing anything per se, other than being who I am naturally, and the Lord's presence is then able to have an impact on the environment where I happen to be.
And everybody feels valued, cared for, nurtured, built up, appreciated, believed in,
Yes.
Opportunity, and then opportunities just branch out, and it's just amazing.
Yes, it is.
Well, Willie, thank you so much for this time. These are some great thoughts. I hope everybody listening has some food for thought, some things to think about, and the difference we can all make to value other people with the same heart that God values them, and to see their strengths and to build them up. Willie, you're going to give me some contact information in case anybody wants to follow up, and I think you have another opportunity coming up. If you could just share about that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'll provide you with some information.
Okay.
The website for the Life Planning Institute is lifeplanninginstitute.org.
And I'll put it in
It's
the
that
links.
simple, yes. And we are getting ready to host another Kingdom Life Approach course. This is a 3-hour course for 8 weeks. And our first one will be the middle of February. The exact date I still have to determine, but it's going to be mid-month, February 2017, and it will run for 8 weeks.
Okay, great. And then that info will be up on the website
Yes.
as soon as it's confirmed, so you can check back on the link I'm going to provide. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you got a lot out of this. I know I did. This is Jeff Bird with Jeffrey Bird Coaching and Willie Butler from the Life Planning Institute. See you next time.